Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And I think just to stay on time, we'll go ahead and get started if and as folks continue to kind of jump in. But good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's concurrent session on sustainability in course design. And so my name is Tim Stalinga. I'm the director for the Center for Science and Math Education here at Loyola University Chicago, and I'll be moderating this afternoon session. So I'd just like to start by introducing our presenters. We have Ryan Leach from the psychology department here at Loyola, today newly famous for surrounding difficult equations with pictures of cute animals. Susan McCarthy teaches business in Loyola's Arrupe College. Emily Sherritt is from the English department at Loyola, and the team is also joined by Aaron Dernbaugh, who is the director of sustainability at LUC. And so as I was saying, as we were chatting with the team beforehand, I'm really looking forward to this session. Obviously, the stakes are so high in the work of sustainability. And as educators, I think we might have a sense that we have an important role in advancing sustainability on the planet and in our communities, and that it certainly transcends disciplinary boundaries as well, right? But maybe if you're like me, you aren't quite sure how this fits into your own particular area of teaching. And so in this session, our presenters will describe frameworks and strategies and share some resources for implementing sustainability in higher ed contexts, and will also help us to workshop some ideas to put into practice into our own classrooms. So before we start, just want to note that we are recording the session. Slides will be made available after the conference, and please feel free to comment in the chat with any questions or thoughts as they come up that you'd like to share. And so with that, I will turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So nice to see you. Welcome back to Loyola here in 2023. As Timothy said, my name is Aaron Dernbaugh, and I am Loyola's Director of Sustainability. So what that means is I run the Office of Sustainability, which is housed under the School of Environmental Sustainability, but really it's a resource for the full institution. So we're here to support you, faculty, our students, of course, and our staff and the administration in advancing this value, this important value here at Loyola. I start pretty much every presentation with a slide that looks something like this. Sustainability is one of those terms that's used kind of interchangeably with a lot of different purpose and different, I'm sure, marketing outcomes and expectations, depending on how it's being used. But here at Loyola, it really is informed, and our sustainability efforts are grounded in our mission of social justice. It goes back to our tradition as a Catholic Jesuit institution, but also an urban institution. We are in and of Chicago. So what we do when we talk about sustainability is really informed by our history, our identity, and sort of our lived experience. So I like to use this quote to sort of illustrate that context. This is from Pope Francis's 2015 letter on ecology, Laudato Si, or the encyclical on ecology. And really what Laudato Si illustrates is a concept that he refers to as an integral ecology. And for me to distill it, I'll say it's what we do to people, we do to the planet, and what we do to the planet, we do to people. And I think we, as Tim said in his introduction, we can sometimes be within our disciplines, and we're going to hear some examples, thankfully, from the different presenters today about how they approach sustainability in their discipline. But it can feel sometimes that we are within a disciplinary framework that could be, maybe it is more I'll say planetary focus, but maybe it's a science approach or something that's not in the natural sciences or even in one of the other academic disciplines like math or computer science or something like that. Or we're in a social discipline, we're in social work, or within psychology or theology. And we don't always see the interaction, and yet Pope Francis calls us to seek out that intersection and that integral nature of solving these issues for both, because oftentimes if we don't solve for one, the other one keeps us from ever meeting our actual solution. If we can't solve the environmental issue, then we may not be able to solve the societal or familial or individual issue that that we're facing or wrestling with. Next slide, please. So, of course, we're a university. We do have a role and a responsibility, not just in probably what you do each day in teaching or research, but also to run a healthy and sustainable institution. And so this was a report that was done by a group that we're a member of here at Loyola called ASHE, the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. And it breaks down the value of sustainability in higher education into these 6 categories. So I won't go into all of them, but I will just say, depending on the conversation you're having with a colleague or with an administrator, or who knows, maybe with a donor or a grantor, you may want to refer to this resource in this report to show how it adds value to the role you have within the institution. And I think of that, it can be a great one for talking about fundraising and for new sort of approaches to the discipline that you address, but it can also be related to community relations. Some of you might be doing work that has deep relationships with community or neighborhoods around Loyola, and sustainability can often be an important value for those communities that we're working to engage. We've got lots of examples of that I won't give, but I will just point out one of them, the 4th bullet on this list, which is we actually ask our incoming students, how important was sustainability in your decision to attend Loyola? We've asked this every year since, I believe, 2015, but our most recent year, so the first year students that we have on campus this spring, right, last fall and this spring, said 54.4%, and these are all kinds of majors, declared, not declared, said that sustainability was important or very important in their decision to attend Loyola. Not that this is all about marketing and competition, but we are in a crowded marketplace, whether it's amongst Jesuit institutions, whether it's amongst Chicago-based institutions. And so sustainability has become an important value for Loyola and a differentiator for students as they're thinking about which school to attend or which academic program to pursue. Next slide, please. So this is just a framework to maybe think about sustainability as you wrestle with incorporating it into your course or your research or your experience here at Loyola. This at a high level is our mission for sustainability within the university. But the Venn diagram that you see there in the left is a way that I think about sustainability. And I often am asking a question about where can we find sustainability initiatives that, yes, connect to the curriculum, whether they're organized into a class or into a research initiative by a faculty member or a group of students, but also can have an impact or an imprint on the campus, so our infrastructure. And that doesn't have to be buildings or landscapes. That can be other parts of the way we manage our assets. That could be our financial footprint, our endowment, could be the sort of governance or organizational structure of the university. That the campus part includes that. And then the culture, the community, the communications around the university, I think is really important, because if we just do it and it stays, even though it might be really important, might change the way we manage a building or the way we manage some asset that we have, but if we don't talk to people about it, we're really not doing, and engage our broader community in it. We're really kind of missing, plucking the low-hanging fruit at that point. So I often try to look for projects that find their way sort of nestled within the campus culture and curriculum of Loyola. I think click a button and I think there'll be another graph. There we go. So what does this look like in practice? Well, it looks like all these different units that we partner with in the Office of Sustainability. So academic affairs, different schools are certainly leading strengths around sustainability. In the campus side, it's the facilities department, the purchasing department, our dining program. in the culture, it's student government, it's certainly residence life, it's the Jesuit community we do a lot of interesting projects with, and then the DEI office, we're exploring a lot of new, that's an important part of sustainability, obviously inclusion and making sure that it's sustainable for all. How do we organize that? We have a university-wide sustainability committee, includes student, staff, and faculty representatives, including deans and other administrators, and then they kind of oversee the work that I do in the Office of Sustainability and with my staff of Loyola professionals and students. Next slide, please. This is a long list of sustainability programs that we've identified. All of the things that you see here, all of these different degrees, sorry, the formatting's a little funky, but we consider sustainability programs. We think that the students that are going through these programs actually do come out of Loyola with a literacy around sustainability issues as it relates to their discipline. We're also very lucky that sustainability has been incorporated into the core curriculum. So Loyola students must take ENVS 101, non-science Loyola students, undergraduates must take, which is a direct introduction to sustainability concepts, but then these degrees get them a little bit deeper into the experience. And that goes for Rupe students too. So I have students here. Anyway, so you might see there's a degree already existing within the school that you're associated with, in case you want to dive deeper into that. Next slide. A few years ago, this is a resource that's available on our website. I don't have the link here, but I'm sure I can make it available. We convened a group of faculty and administrators, and I saw there's Patrick here. He was part of this process where we reflected on what should sustainability learning outcomes be at Loyola. So irrespective of the discipline, if we were asking ourselves, what would we like students to understand and be able to put into practice? And so they're listed here on the left column, now in knowledge, values, and skills categories. But that was a group of faculty meeting over a year and a half, I think, to really define this. And then we distilled this into a report. It touches, this report's available online, but it touches on how it connects into engaged learning, how it connects into the core, how it connects into some of those academic programs I mentioned. But also some recommendations on how to continue to build upon this value within the academic life at Loyola. And we gave this to academic affairs, the provost's office, and that was a previous provost, but that was supported at the time. And we're continuing to explore ways to build this out. I will say we're very hopeful. We've been able to support faculty as they look to incorporate sustainability into their curriculum, but we're always looking for more opportunities. And next academic year, I am pretty hopeful that I'm going to actually have some staff capacity to go around and talk to other faculty around Loyola on what could help, what could be more resources. So I know we're presenting a little bit of the resources we have available today, but I guess I want to leave a question for all of you, which is, what more resources do you think would be valuable, whether it's incorporating it specific to your discipline, specific to your research, specific to the courses that you're teaching, or maybe it's personal. Maybe it's the way you work at Loyola, the spaces you inhabit. Maybe it's in your community. You have a role in other civic in life, and you'd like to have more resources for sustainability. Maybe keep that question in the back of your mind, because next year, I'm really hoping to have someone who's going to be going out and hosting some sort of open houses where we can collect more of that information to develop more of those resources and continue to move this value forward. Next slide, next and last slide for me. I'll just end my time by saying we do have a series of resources available. Some are faculty oriented and some are just for all employees. So whether it's like for all employees, you can do pre-tax transit benefits, trying to get more folks onto transit. It might be the green office resources, green lab resources, greening your event, our composting program, our variety of zero waste programs, but specifically our composting program. Anyway, there's a whole set of resources here that are listed on this slide, and lots of examples and case studies on ways we've partnered with faculty, and you're going to hear some of them shortly, but I'll just leave it there and say that we're here as the Office of Sustainability to be your resource. You can email me directly or sustainability@luc.edu, the URL you see right there. And we welcome your your questions, and it helps us think what more we can develop to support your work, to make it easy so that your courses can incorporate these concepts. And with that, I think Susan is going to take over.
Thanks, Erin. One of the resources that I found out about from your office was actually the Sustainability Across the Curriculum program at Santa Clara University. So Ryan, Emily, and I were all part of this virtual online class in summer of 2022. So we're going to talk a little bit about our experiences there and sort of how we've applied them to our classes. So just to set the stage a little bit, Sustainability Across the Curriculum, this was an online class through Santa Clara University. The goal was to get their faculty and other faculty to sort of think about how to move sustainability into the classes. So over the time frame, we had a couple templates of a couple sort of prompts that we were given to start thinking. So I'm going to start by kind of just letting you know the prompts, and then I'll tell you about kind of how I use them. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to loop back to these same prompts and give you some time for you to think about, well, how could you start to build sustainability into your class or classes? So the curriculum started out, they gave us some ideas on some different models of sustainability. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I'm happy to provide more information later on that. But we thought about how are we going to sort of think about model of sustainability to use? And a couple of them are listed out here. So again, sort of a basic way for our students to start thinking about sustainability and who is part of this conversation or who is left out of this conversation. The next prompt was to think about, well, how are you going to teach sustainability? And if you're at a teaching and learning conference, you're probably thought about pedagogy before. So will you lecture? Will you assign readings? Are there videos? Are there activities? Are there other things? So again, as part of this class, we were given time to sort of think about these, share within groups, grouped by discipline to sort of build upon our classes. The next prompt, and this is the one I found pretty difficult for me, was learning objectives. What do you want your students to know and do about sustainability? And if you go back to Erin's slides, there are some learning outcomes that the university has come up with. So that's a great place to start. Those are sort of general across disciplines. And then you can dig in a little bit further and think about what do you want from your class or your discipline for your specific learning objectives. But I found it helpful to start with the ones that the university had to start thinking about these. And then the final prompt that we were given was, how will you meet your learning objectives? Will you do a case study? Will you do a lab? Will you do a field experiment or a project over the whole semester? Can we work with the community? So collaborative learning, can we have that inside the classroom? Can students take that outside the classroom and work in the community? Can we use the campus as a living lab? I think a lot of us are familiar with LUREC, the space that Loyola has. Also, I've taken students just to visit the SES building and just give them a tour there. Is there a way to use the garden? So are there different ways that we can use the spaces that we already have as a living lab for our students? And again, coming back to the idea of Loyola as part of the community. Can students go back to their community to bring these sustainability ideas? At the end of all of this, we also had to think about, does it make sense to modify a current class, or are you so excited and have the time to develop a new one? So you'll see we've done different things. I just modified a current class, but Ryan is actually developing a new one. So we've got, and then Emily's in the middle. So we've got different ways of talking through how we move forward from this. So the class that I thought about for spring is introductory accounting class. So this is a business class for first and second year business students. All of them take it. I teach at a Rupe college. So the idea is to start to think about, not everybody wants to be accountant, but they're all are interested in business. So the model of sustainability that I used was this really kind of basic one, where we're thinking about the environment, we're thinking about society, and we're thinking about the economy. How can we consider these three components? As I move forward, I thought about how I'm going to teach sustainability. So this is actually a pretty interesting and exciting time in accounting, is because the disclosures around sustainability are up in the air. The SEC, corporations, this is a discussion that is currently going on. So it's really exciting that the students can be part of this discussion, because nothing's been set yet. Nothing has been settled. So we really want to keep lecture to a minimum here. We want to focus on readings, which include sustainability reports. What are the companies saying about the work that they're already doing? And we also will look at disclosures in their financial statements. So what are they required to report versus what are they choosing to report? So there's some compare and contrast that can be done there. There's also a lot of video materials out there. Companies are trying to teach their employees how to deal with sustainability, how to report out these disclosures. So there's lots of good professional materials out there from the companies, from the accounting associations. A couple of the activities that I'm thinking about considering are discussions. I think students are interested. You saw from Erin's slide, over 50% of students, it's really important. They're at Loyola because of sustainability, or that's something that's important to them. So let's harness that. Let's have these discussions. Part of accounting is numbers. So this is an interesting way to get students to sort of work on Excel skills, visualization skills, those tech skills that they will be using in their jobs. And we can use sustainability as the theme to use these analytics. And then finally, role play. There's a lot of players in this area right now. We've got government regulators, we've got the companies, we've got the community. Can we role play who's part of the conversation and who's not, and who's got the power, right? Can we have those discussions with some role play? And then finally, I've always had great luck with bringing in speakers, bringing in young, dynamic speakers that are just a couple years out of school. Alums are great. They can tell the students what it's like on the day-to-day. What does it mean to do accounting? And especially now with this idea of sustainability. All right, so for learning objectives, I started with the general ones from the Loyola report, and then I wanted to dig in a little bit more in my discipline and specifically look at principles of accounting, which is sort of an introductory class. So the table here is from an article written by some accounting professors, and they argue that sustainability, and I agree, should be across the accounting curriculum. So I focused on 1, 3, and 6, because I'm dealing with introductory students. They're just starting out. So I just want to teach them about ESG, which is environmental, social, and governmental reporting. Have them sort of compare and contrast what's been done before, sort of traditional financial reporting under GAAP, and now this new ESG reporting that's coming out. And then number 6, how can they see themselves in this space as a business person in sustainability? So a couple of assignments that I am going to add for spring 2023, so check back in 6 months, we'll see how it goes, are these assignments. So students are going to compare financial and ESG reporting. So as part of the introductory accounting curriculum, they need to learn GAAP, which is the rules for disclosing financial information. But can we compare that to what corporations are saying about sustainability? And are there things that are being left out? Are there things that students want to know about these companies or regulators would want to know? And then again, making sure that we can identify some job opportunities or internship opportunities, or just where could a student see themselves in this space? Maybe as an entrepreneur, maybe as an accountant, maybe as a regulator. So again, having them look at some job ads and then having the speakers come in to talk a little bit about what's really going on. So these are a couple of the assignments that I will be adding. So again, I'm not changing a class, I'm just adding a couple assignments to sort of bring in or sort of infuse sustainability into the introductory accounting class. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Emily. As this is something I'm going to do, Emily can talk about something that she already has done with sustainability in her classes.
Thank you, Susan. And Corey, I do want to acknowledge that we see your hand. If you could jot down your question in the chat, that will help us come back to it when we open up space for questions. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate you joining us today as we discuss methods for incorporating lessons on sustainability in our classrooms. My name is Emily Sherritt, and I work in the English department at Loyola. I pursue research in the environmental humanities, a field that tethers cultural and ecological studies, and I aim to bring my eco-social research to our students in accessible ways. Today, I complement Susan's presentation by also describing at depth an in-class activity that I led at Loyola, and I will demonstrate how we might approach sustainability from the perspective of literary studies. Please advance, Susan. I debated the moral and ethical aspects of sustainability with my students in English 271, an elective course on poetry that I taught during the summer A term of 2021. I framed the course as an introduction to the environmental humanities to engage students in a study of environmentally attuned literature, broadly conceived. As a 6-week writing intensive section of poetry and environment, I knew to expect 3rd and 4th year students who might be interested in poetry, though they were likely not English majors. I crafted a course that I hoped would inspire interest in poetics that considered ecology. Please advance, Susan. I had 5 weeks to cover course content with students before they tackled their final exams in week 6. In week 1, students explored the purview of the environmental humanities, considering how for centuries, playwrights, theologians, painters, poets, filmmakers, and other creatives have reflected on the environment in their work. I framed this introductory lesson as a way for students to begin debating the unique insights that literary studies offers to the environmental humanities, as well as to start theorizing the purpose of poetry. Our discussions in week 1 primed students to think of the utility of the assigned readings, all poems that consider the environment in some way. In later weeks, we studied the conventions of poetry by analyzing poems on nature or on humanity's role in an ecosystem. Please advance. In week 3 of the course, I led an in-class activity that I titled Celebrate Sustainably. As the activity fell in the middle of the course, I knew that I could rely on students to engage in the activity while bearing in mind the course objective, to debate issues of sustainability while analyzing poetry. Please advance. By the middle of the term, students knew that I designed all course activities and student assignments in ways that asked students to sharpen their ability to identify and analyze poetic conventions by reading and discussing elements of poems that argue that social behaviors impact ecology and vice versa. Students did not have to choose to study sustainability or to study poetry. Rather, the poem itself could call students to think critically about poetry and sustainability. Please advance. The activity Celebrate Sustainably asks students to discuss Elizabeth Bishop's poem called The Armadillo, to demonstrate that analyzing poetry can lead to a sustained discussion of sustainability. First, we encounter the poem in 3 modes: silently, then silently while writing in the margins, how the poem uniquely employs syntax, diction, figures of speech, and more conventions to create meaning. And finally, aloud as a class to attend to the way the poem sounds. The next portion of the class is spent identifying and analyzing to what end the poem uses specific syntax, diction, stanza breaks, enjambment, or other poetic conventions. And we do that to ask what the poem means. What is it saying, and how is it saying it? By this point in the term, students are looking for comments on ecology, often from post-colonial or ecofeminist methodologies that I model in class. Please advance. The in-class activity requires students to identify the poem's content and form before analyzing the poem's social utility. Students note, and here you can look at the poem, the lines of the poem, but if you don't have access to the visuals, you can just listen to what the poem says. So the poem describes beautiful, though illegal, fire lanterns lighting the sky during an annual ritual meant to honor a saint. Students also articulate that the poem states how the balloons return to Earth as falling fire, destroying the homes of both human and non-human creatures. While pinpointing the function of specific poetic conventions, the class debates what the poem tells us about a celebratory ceremony that requires single-use resources while posing a risk to ecology. Students confront and discuss that the fire balloons are banned, but the ban is ignored. By analyzing Bishop's poem, the class meditates on the role of sustainability in communal law, traditions, rituals, and poetry. Later activities and assignments can challenge students to respond to the poem. In this way, as Susan was describing, students can see themselves interacting with the poem. What does this poem mean for their lives? So they might think about questions such as, are there ways to celebrate sustainably? What do we do if an annual tradition transgresses sustainability goals? And so students are able to articulate for themselves where they fall in a world that does or does not hold up to sustainability goals that we might espouse, and we can debate the moral imperatives to be sustainable and to craft sustainable social institutions. And next slide. Thank you. So just a quick little nod to my email right here. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer via chat or when we open up space for discussion or via email. Thank you. Over to you, Ryan.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Emily. And yeah, as Susan said earlier, I'm going to be talking about a new class that I sort of built from the ground up. And before I start, I do want to give a shout out to Robin Mallett, who was the original creator of the idea behind this course. Gave me a lot of resources to get me started, even told me about the Santa Clara workshop that we're all talking about right now. So a big reason why I'm up here today talking to you about this. So I'm going to be talking about this course, Environmental Psychology. I'm from the psychology department, lecturer there. I'm going to be teaching this class in about a week. So if everyone wishes me luck with this, we'll see how it goes. Next slide, please. So this is just one slide of the entire course layout. On the left, you have all of the topics we're going to be discussing in lecture/activities. And on the right are the main projects that students are going to be teaming up and working on throughout the course. I'll get to the topics in a second. We'll focus right now on the projects here. So first we have this self-change project where we are going to be talking in this course a lot about how do we get people to change their individual behavior towards the environment. So to have the best understanding of that, and very early on in the course, we're going to ask students to do that themselves. We're also going to be setting up the conditions to make it the most likely that they're going to be able to do this successfully. So you see the first bullet point there is a public commitment. Everyone is going to get up in front of the class after doing a little bit of research on their self-change they want to do, and they're going to say, this is my goal at the end of the semester to use fewer water bottles or something like that. At the end of the course, we're going to have another presentation, and every student is going to be talking about how that went for them, whether they were able to do that successfully. Then there's going to be kind of a final paper. It's mainly a reflection exercise of what it was like for them to change their behavior to be more sustainable. What was hard about it? What were some of the challenges that they had to overcome? Next, we have a campus signage project. So we're going to be talking about what makes signage convincing, persuading versus not convincing and not persuading. So they'll be using some of that knowledge to create art for their signs, messages for their signs. And they're going to be thinking about where on campus, so what sort of campus behavior needs to be pointed out on campus. How can that change? And so then another short reflection assignment on why this needs to happen, where the sign's going to be, and how that behavior is going to make the campus more sustainable. And then lastly, we have the public persuasive message campaign. So some sort of public service announcement that people can create and talk about okay, why might this help? What are some of the challenges to persuading people with this? This is a big theme of the course, is persuasion. And a short essay at the end of the year, sort of a final paper where they're going to be talking about their public persuasive message and what the effects of that message would be. Next slide, please. So you'll notice with the topics, if you paid attention that at the beginning of my talk, I am a psychologist, and these first three topics are not psychology. So these are things that I kind of had to like start at the ground level, or ground zero, for, okay, my own knowledge. What are some things that I have to pick up before I even start this task? So the first thing we talk about in the course are environmental problems that are caused by human behavior. So that's another focus of this course. We are talking about psychology. That's the study of human thoughts, feelings, and actions. So what have human actions done? It's not just climate change. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. I'll get into that in a little bit more detail later. We're also going to be talking about the history of environmentalism in this country. So specifically in America, where did this start? Where has it gone? We kind of have to get a little bit political about it. Again, I'll get a little bit more in detail on a later slide. And then finally, the principles of ecology are not something that, not things that I was at all familiar with before I started putting together this course. So some really interesting things there. And I think learning these things for myself and hopefully for the students will increase our environmental knowledge to a kind of a point where we understand what's the real problem with human behavior, and what is like maybe the goal state that we are trying to get people to change their behavior to. So we'll get into that again in a little bit more detail later. So the rest are more, kind of that psychological side. So like research methods, learning behavior, cognitive processes, individual differences, and motivational theories are all like psychological things. So what I had to learn is sort of like this background information about the environment, about ecology, about environmentalism, that I started this preparation knowing nothing about, and sort of having to kind of learn all these things on the way. Next slide, please. So as I was talking about, a little bit more detail. So hopefully you're ready for some fun facts. And I, of course, use the word fun in the largest of air quotes. So in our class, we're going to start by talking about ecological footprints versus biocapacity. So basically what I mean here is like how many resources we are using as a population, all I think 9 billion of us now, versus how quickly the planet can replace those resources. So currently, in our current time, we are using the same resources that 1.75 Earths would have on it. That is the amount of planets we need to replace the resources that we are currently using. If everyone lived like Americans, it would be 5 Earths. So that sort of gives you an idea of like, okay, where are we at? Where is our behavior? How is this contributing to what we're talking about here? I kind of wanted to give a little bit of maybe not necessarily good news, but just sort of like maybe something to alleviate self-blame here. Is like, we really exceeded biocapacity in the 1970s. Most of my students are going to not have been born at that time. So we can be very clear that this is a problem that we were all born into. And when we're talking about like these, number of Earths, we're just talking about humans. There is, of course, a whole animal kingdom that some of you might even be teaching about that also need the planet and the planet's resources. And we're not counting that in the 1.75 Earths. So, human behavior and how our culture is sort of interacting with the environment is a huge problem. Of course, there's like different areas of sustainability. I said before, this is not just climate change. Of course, we do have energy. And so that's sort of the big climate change factor. Water, so the way we use water is very unsustainable. The people who live out west can kind of attest to that in a little bit more personal detail. We also have food and material goods, i.e. trash. So all of our waste is really building up. So something that might be a little bit depressing here is that even if we personally decrease our consumption, most of our consumption of energy, water, food, and material goods are indirect, meaning that the things that we use to live are actually just like, even if we are sort of living sustainably, the products we buy create waste by themselves. Like, we didn't actually create the waste in our life, but what we consume is indirectly creating all of that waste. So my favorite example of this, this was just on NPR. You might have heard of this. There was a study in 2018 about reusable bags. So if anyone brings like those cotton reusable bags to grocery stores to sort of like avoid having to use those single-use plastic bags, one cotton reusable bag, if you're talking about energy, water use, land use, indirectly causes as much problems as 7,100 single-use plastic bags. So if you do have a cotton reusable bag, you need to use that a lot to make it worth all of this indirect waste that causes. All right, so next slide. So I'm not going to get into this a lot, but we do want to talk about the history of environmentalism. The big thing here is the dominant social paradigm that sort of is kind of a cultural term here. So it has these four kind of assumptions here. Humans are separate from and superior to nature. This is something that you might seem as familiar. Nature can and should be controlled. Like, we're doing this all the time. Individuals have a right to maximize economic gain. Kind of related to that, progress equals growth. Like, think about the political sphere right now. When people are talking about the economy, all of these things that are just like, what's important to voters, right? It's all about growth and the economy and economic gain, controlling nature, right? So that's sort of like how we've lived for a number of years. This, of course, comes from European colonialism, and with that came, native genocide and the slave trade. This is sort of what we were talking about here. Also, kind of this is kind of with this is the equity side. Who gets to be human and who has to be nature, right? Who is controlled and who gets to control are all sort of wrapped up in this. And then we need to kind of get into more modern history. So like preservationism, conservationism. Of course, once these things started becoming big things, there was backlash. And then there's, with anything, backlash to the backlash. And then there's what I call the backlash to the backlash's backlash. That's the Green Decade. So the 1970s, there was a lot of environmental reforms enacted by both Democrats and Republicans. And then, of course, I was hoping to go my entire career without having to talk about Ronald Reagan, but unfortunately with this class, that streak's going to have to end. So the great backlash to environmentalism, Ronald Reagan. And unfortunately, nowadays, there's really a big difference between Democrats and Republicans. And that was, as you might just remembered, I just mentioned this, not used to have been a thing. So nowadays, we have to talk about politics whenever we get into caring about the environment. Nowadays, it's sort of like you either care about the environment or you care about the economy, right? You care about families and people's finances. So it's sort of like set up this dichotomy that didn't necessarily exist before. Next slide. So lastly, I'm not going to get into these in a lot of detail, but just sort of a lot of things I had to learn for this course are principles of ecology. So all life is interdependent, where you sort of make a change in one part of the environment, it's going to make a change in the other part of the environment, and small actions can have big consequences with that. We're also going to be talking about circular systems versus linear systems. So like the trash, you buy a thing, they use a bunch of resources to create that thing, you then throw that thing away. That's a linear system. You start out at a different point than you end. A circular system sort of just goes around, you start at the same point where you end. So if you have sort of like sustainable agriculture, you might have like animals, those animals are creating waste, you use that waste to grow plants, those plants are then used to feed the animals, right? So that's it sort of goes back to where it started, a circular system. So that's going to be a big focus. There's a limits to growth, so we can have these big industries, but that's going to sort of like reduce the Earth's resources, and then they're going to directly affect those industries. Diversity equals resilience. So this is something that, like, we can talk about a lot of things here, but one example would be just like plant life. If you've heard of the Irish potato famine, one of the biggest causes of this was a blight that affected a specific type of potato plant. And because they were using what we're going to call a monoculture, there was not a whole lot of resistance to this blight. And then finally, we're talking about upstream solutions being greater than downstream solutions. So you've heard reduce, reuse, recycle. That's really an order of importance. So reducing is sort of like this upstream solution. If you can just buy less stuff, that's going to really be the best way of living sustainably. Recycling is fine, but that's kind of a downstream solution. You've already bought the thing, you've already sort of wanting to throw the thing away. You then need to sort of like put this into a more of a linear system. And that may or may not actually like have a big effect. So upstream solutions being greater than downstream solutions is a very important ecological point. All right, next slide. So here's just, I don't know, a nice picture I like with these principles. So we are sort of having effects and controlling nature at our own peril. Eventually, the things we're doing to control nature are going to come back and bite us. So anyway, this is just a picture I like showing a lot in the course. Next slide. So not going to really talk about this, but this is just department specific material for me, like the actual psychology that I want to talk about in the course. You'll notice nothing that I said recently has been about psychology at all. But it's necessary background information to then understand, okay, how to do research, how to get people to learn, the cognitive processes during this. We want to get people to think about like circular systems and everything. So we need to understand what circular systems are before we understand, okay, what is human behavior doing here? All right, next slide. So you probably have been thinking about this if you're here at the sustainability workshop. So just to get you started, and definitely something that helped me get started is like, okay, so what principles within my own field can be applied to sustainability? So specifically for me as a psychologist, it was human behavior. How do we change human behavior? How do we understand human behavior? And what is human behavior doing to the environment? So that was a very good segue for me. But you will probably need to think of different segues. What previous knowledge will students need? What is the background information that you might have to learn yourself in order to like make those sustainability concepts applicable to your course? And then finally, is there any help out there? So I actually have found a textbook, The Psychology of Sustainability, that I use for a lot of my lessons. But of course, I'm not just talking about like departmental specific resources. I kind of want to circle back to what Aaron was talking about too. So like even on campus, we have a lot of resources that we can use. To get you started on anything, like the best thing you can do is to reach out for help. And there's a lot of people you can reach out to. All right, thank you.
So before we jump into sort of a chance for us to explore some of those questions that Ryan proposed and some of the questions that came up in the sustainability across the curriculum, we just wanted to see, I see a couple of things in the chat and we had a hand up. So I do want to get a chance to get people to answer, or sorry, to ask questions. Somebody had their hand up.
Yeah, that was me, but I forgot my question.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I was, Susan, it was actually to you. It was about thought of adding the ethical dilemma, the ethical problem of greenwashing and ESG reporting as a part of what you're doing as a next step.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that I was thinking of that as part of that, comparing the financial statement disclosures, which are required, which there's rules around, versus the sustainability reports, where right now the companies are putting those out on their own. And what are we seeing in those differences? But yeah, I think that is a great way to get the students involved. They see ads, they see marketing, they know why they buy things. So yeah, no, I think that is I think that's, yeah, that's an important part. And I thought that would be sort of part of that compare and contrast. But if you've got ideas or an activity that you've done, I see, you know, you obviously are in the ethics area, would love to hear things that could be used in an accounting class, right? It doesn't have to just be the numbers. Where else could we talk about greenwashing?
Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. Any other questions for anybody?
Okay, so I know I'm really going to give everybody a chance to get in here, but I'm just curious. You guys have done a wonderful job of presenting what you're doing, but what I don't see in all this, you know, in everything you've talked about today, that anti-racism component should be a part of, because unsustainability is patently racist. And integral ecology says we cannot, as you said, we cannot get to sustainability without getting to living together. And residential segregation as living patterns contribute a great deal to greenhouse gas. And then in terms of the business aspect, there are 100 companies, fossil fuel companies that are responsible for over 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. And so as we say I'm a secular Franciscan, so as we say in the secular Franciscans, global warming has a name and an address. And so these are all components. I think, I hope that you kind of think about how to systematize your approach and look at the anti-racism part being in the urban development part, being part of what you do, because part of what is the beauty of Chicago is the urban environments and the fact that, you know, not everybody, I mean, you have problems with concentrated poverty in Chicago, and how you get at those and having projects and thinking around those would be beneficial. And that's something everybody can contribute from every discipline.
I agree, Corey. And I think one of our goals here is to reach out to each other. I know Ryan and Emily because we were in the sustainability class together, and I was given their name, right? And so I think, you know, I would love to talk to you. And our goal here is to, let's build these connections. Let's build these resources. We're all doing different things. How can we work together? And Ryan and Emily, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. But I mean, that's sort of, you know, that was one of the reasons why we wanted to do this presentation.
Yeah, Corey, I really like the global warming has a name and an address. That's like very poignant. So that was kind of something I meant to mention with my history. Like we're getting into the history of environmental justice as well. Like kind of like what goes into that, like most of our consumption is indirect, as well as a lot of corporations will tell us that it's really our responsibility, right? Like just use your reusable bags and just sort of like have a specific way of living for yourself. And then, you know, all of our planet's problems are going to be solved. Where like it's kind of pointing the finger, maybe the wrong direction. So that's like something that like we're going to highlight a lot in the course, and it's like a very important point.
Thank you for sharing, Corey. And one of the things that the in-class activity that I described, one of the discussion points that came out of that was which types of authors are given a platform to even voice something that is happening in the neighborhood that they are living in. So the author was a white woman who was living in South America and was writing about something that she saw each year. So the voices that are represented matter. The voices that are represented in specific anthologies matter. It gives us a space to move out beyond Loyola and think about the way that museums in Chicago are also can serve as a laboratory, kind of a living campus, to think about whose voices are kept in that museum. What does it mean to keep a history, and what types of resources are used to maintain and collect a history, keep it for a public to view, to think through, to think with, and how can we do that with an ethical and more capacious kind of mentality. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Corey, for bringing that up. I just wanted to highlight, you might have seen me zip back to my bookshelf. I just read this. So Climate Change is Racist. It's really kind of a little bit more European centric. It's written by a English author, but it's your comment there about unsustainable behavior being racist and climate change having an address. I think it's what we're seeing, right now with the flooding of farm workers in California. It's what we're seeing anytime we have these extreme events. So let alone with climate refugees, which is going to be the theme of a symposium part of this year's climate change conference. So that the School of Environmental Sustainability hosts in March. But yeah, you're right on point, Corey. And I think, we can't do everything with every project, but where we can find those intersectional dialogues and solutions, it's right in the wheelhouse of Loyola to wade into that murkiness. So thanks for bringing that forward.
Okay, one last point, I'll make it quick. Food justice. Food justice is another one of those topics where you can really do some things with sustainability and sustainable thinking.
Yeah, and
Yeah, Corey, go ahead, Aaron.
No, I was going to say, and it's exciting that we have a variety of different faculty working on food justice research at different campuses, especially, I don't know where you're located, Corey, but out at the Maywood campus, there's a lot doing kind of with bioethics. I thought you might be sort of out there.
I did an article with Lena. Yeah.
Lena Hatchett. Yeah. But we have others in other schools too, in sociology and in other places doing some really down in the business school in Quinlan with social entrepreneurship. And so there's a lot, plus our own steps with food recovery. We have a very active student chapter of the Food Recovery Network. We have food banks now, food pantries on all 3 campuses. We used to just have it as part of Arupe, and now it's at all 3 campuses. So there's things that we're doing for our own population too, because sometimes it can be externally oriented and sometimes it can be internal. So yeah.
So I am looking at our time, and we're drawing close to the hour. So I just want to shout out a big thank you to our presenters, Aaron, Susan, Emily, Ryan. We really appreciate your sharing of insights, strategies, all the examples that you shared with us, really to help us think about approaches to sustainability that we can draw from in practice. I know I definitely picked out some ideas that can apply to some of our math and science work. So thanks to all of you, to everyone, for your thoughtful participation in the session as well, and in today's conference as well. These things only happen with the all of you bringing your own thoughts and open-mindedness and interest and inquiry, and so we really appreciate your thoughtful participation. Special shout out to Corey for highlighting some of those connections, really important, between sustainability and racial justice. So again, the slides and recordings will be made available through FCIP, so please keep an eye out for that. And on behalf of the Photo Planning Committee, I just want to wish you all a great spring semester, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tim.